Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I got off work early that Thursday, not for any big reason. There wasn't a promotion or celebration. Just one of those rare afternoons where everything wrapped up quicker than expected, and I figured I'd surprise her. We'd had a decent week. No arguments, no cold shoulders. She even texted me that morning asking if I'd remembered to pick up the oat milk she liked. I had. I always did. On the way home, I picked up her favorite pastry from that French bakery she liked. The one with the raspberry cream and the flaky crust that always left a mess on the counter. I was even thinking maybe we could go for a walk after dinner, something light before the weekend rush. Nothing big, just us. The lights were already on when I pulled into the driveway. I figured she must have had one of her friends over, probably Kim or Alyssa, judging by the extra pair of flats near the doormat. I smiled to myself. She always lit up when she talked with them, and I liked that she had a support system. The voices came from the kitchen, low at first, then rising with laughter. I paused inside the hallway, out of sight, the bag with her pastry still in my hand. I wasn't eavesdropping, at least, not at first. But when I heard my name, something in me stilled. "She still doesn't know," one voice asked. "Nope," came the response, my wife's. "He has no clue. I could probably tell him the sun is purple and he'd just nod and ask if I need help carrying it inside." Laughter followed. Then, "He's sweet. I'll give him that. But in a kind of soft way. You know? Like a pillow. A little too easy to sink into and forget." "Girl, you're evil," the other woman giggled. "No, seriously," she said, louder now, energized by the reaction. "He tries so hard, buys flowers, runs errands, always asks how my day was. Like he's starring in a romantic drama no one else signed up for." Another laugh. "Some women would kill for that." "Sure," my wife replied, "if they wanted a golden retriever. He's just there. Always kind. Never says no. Honestly, it's kind of adorable. Like watching a puppy bring you your slippers. He still opens the car door for me," she added with a laugh. "Who does that in 2025? He sounds like a saint." No, saints have boundaries. That last one stung. Because she wasn't wrong. I had never set boundaries. I loved her loudly, without hesitation. I believed kindness wasn't weakness, that showing up consistently meant something, that loyalty had weight. But hearing her mock it? That twisted everything. I bet if you asked him to massage your feet while apologizing for breathing too loudly, he'd do it. "Oh, he would," she said, no hesitation. "He'd probably thank me for the opportunity." They were in tears by then. Real, breathless laughter. Not just at me, but at the idea of me. The kind of laughter people reserve for cartoon characters or sitcom fools who never realize they're the punchline. I looked down at the bag in my hand. The pastry box was damp from the pressure of my grip. I didn't even feel myself squeezing it until I noticed the red stain bleeding through the paper. Every instinct told me to walk in and say something. Anything. Make a joke. Diffuse it. Ask for context. But something else stopped me. Something heavier than shame or embarrassment. Clarity. She hadn't slipped up. She wasn't venting. She was putting on a show. A performance for her friend. And I was the clown in her narrative, the overly eager, selfless joke of a man who didn't realize he was being used as entertainment. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was how she saw me. How she had probably always seen me. I stepped back slowly, careful not to make the floor creak. Walked out the same way I came in. Quiet. Controlled. Like a man who'd seen enough to know silence would speak louder than confrontation ever could. Back in the car, I sat in the driver's seat for a while, letting the cold pastry box rest on the passenger seat like an unused prop. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, searching for something, maybe a sign of anger, maybe the flicker of hurt. But all I saw was exhaustion. Not the kind from work or errands or chores. Something deeper. The exhaustion that comes from realizing the foundation you built everything on was hollow underneath. I didn't send a message or make a call. I drove. No destination. Just the open road and the growing certainty that the man I'd been, the kind one, the ever-forgiving, the endlessly giving, wasn't invited into that house anymore. Not by her. Not by anyone who could laugh about love like that. She saw my kindness as weakness. That's on her. But the part of me that used to stick around and prove them wrong? He doesn't live here anymore. I parked in a 24-hour grocery store lot, tilted my seat back, and stared at the ceiling of my car as the fluorescent parking lot lights burned above. What I felt was something quieter, colder. A kind of mental unclenching, like a knot that had finally given up holding itself together. I slept for maybe an hour. Restless, uncomfortable sleep. The kind where your mind doesn't turn off. It floats between images and thoughts you wish you could ignore. Her laughter echoed in those flickers of unconsciousness. Not just the sound of it, but the tone, amused, dismissive. It wasn't how a woman spoke about a man she respected. It was how someone talked about a well-trained pet. By sunrise, I had made a decision. Not with drama. Not with fire in my chest. If that's how she saw me, as a man who existed to serve, to obey, to make life easier without asking for much in return, then I'd give her exactly what she wanted. I'd make myself invisible, but not in the way she expected. Not by sulking or begging. I'd vanish on my own terms, not out of pain but clarity. I had never hidden anything from her: passwords, phone access, my calendar. She had open access to every corner of my life. But I started by drawing that boundary, a quiet declaration that this version of me, the one who bent over backward to make her comfortable, was done. Then I called my company and requested to work remotely for a few weeks. No one questioned it. I had unused leave, years of never asking for anything. They were more than happy to accommodate. I rented a small place across town, nothing dramatic, just a furnished one-bedroom apartment with a month-to-month lease. I packed a bag from my gym locker at work, used the company shower, changed into fresh clothes. She wouldn't even notice I was gone for at least a day. Maybe two. That's how little I mattered in her world. That's how confident she was I'd never leave. Over the next few days, I played the role. Came home at night, said little, cooked dinner, did the dishes. She was polite, even affectionate in her usual distracted way, the kind where her phone was always within reach, and conversations were filled with half-listened nods. I watched her closely now. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to understand what I'd missed. How many times had she looked through me like that? How often had she smiled while thinking something cruel behind her eyes? I started noticing things that had once slipped by. Like how often she complimented other people, strangers, friends, colleagues, but never me. Or how she rolled her eyes when I mentioned my work, yet recounted her own day like a performer on stage. Her kindness, I realized, was curated, reserved for those whose opinions she valued. I was not among them. One night, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I sat beside her and casually asked, "Do you think I'm weak?" She didn't even look up. "What? Do I come off as soft? Too forgiving?" She laughed, a light chuckle. "No, you're just nice." There's nothing wrong with being nice. But the way she said it, dismissively, like she was brushing lint off her sleeve, made it clear. To her, nice and weak were interchangeable. That was confirmation enough. The next day, I contacted our financial advisor and removed her access to the joint investment account. Not drained it. Not hidden it. Just protected what I had built. I let my attorney review our holdings. No divorce talk. Just preparation. A man who's about to walk away doesn't throw a tantrum. He builds an exit strategy. I also started watching who she talked to. Not in a jealous way. In an observant way. Listening. Noticing. That's when I began to understand something deeper. It wasn't just her. Her friends enabled her. Their conversations always had the same undertone. Men were providers, tools, accessories. I remembered the way one of them had once laughed when I offered to drive them to the airport. "You've really got him trained." Huh? I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. That Saturday, we were invited to a gathering, one of her friends' birthday dinners. A restaurant downtown, semi-formal. I went, played the part, smiled at her friends, made small talk, poured wine. But I watched. At one point, she leaned in to whisper something to the woman beside her. The woman looked at me, giggled, and covered her mouth. But I didn't react. I clinked glasses, laughed along, and watched her sip her drink like everything was perfect. Because I was nearly done writing the final act. All I needed was one more thing. One final thread to pull. And it came the next day, in the form of an old friend, someone we hadn't seen in months. He called me out of the blue. Said he'd heard something from a mutual acquaintance. Something about how my wife talks about me when I'm not around. He wasn't specific, but his tone said enough. "She's not who you think she is," he told me. "And she never has been." That was it. Now I knew for sure. This wasn't an isolated moment or one bad joke. This was her reality. And it was time she experienced mine. I didn't rush anything. That was the key. If she even suspected I was preparing an exit, she'd shift gears, pretend to soften, fake tears, maybe even act like she wanted to rebuild things. She'd done it before, never with much effort, enough to reset the power dynamic. But I wasn't offering her that chance anymore. I wasn't angry, and I sure wasn't desperate. I was calculating, focused, and deliberate. So I leaned in. became more attentive, more reliable, even more accommodating. I knew how she saw me, and now I used that image like armor. I volunteered to help with her upcoming work event, something she'd usually toss at me with a sigh and a dismissive, "Well, you're good at logistics, might as well." She smiled when I offered this time, not realizing she was watching her puppet turn the strings. While I arranged rentals for her tables and chairs, I was also speaking with my attorney about separate property filings. Quiet legal details, nothing flashy. Things she wouldn't understand unless she dug deep, and she wouldn't. I'd lived beside her long enough to know she never read the fine print. She only cared about the final act, the applause, the curated applause from her circle of admirers. She handed me her laptop one evening to print something, and while she scrolled through her phone distractedly, I opened her mail. Not out of suspicion, I already knew who she was, but for confirmation. It didn't take long to find it. There it was, buried in a chain of messages with her friend Tessa, jokes about training your man, a link to a meme comparing men who cook dinner to golden retrievers, and a casual mention of how easy it is to steer him without him noticing. That one landed like a stone dropped into a still lake. Not because it was new, but because it was so relaxed, so effortless. This wasn't some bitter private rant. This was just how she talked about me. Like I was a harmless idiot too docile to question her manipulation. And Tessa, someone I once thought respected me, replied with a laugh and a "teach me your ways." I closed the tab and printed the invoice she needed. The next morning, I met with our banker, requested changes to how household bills were drawn. Legally, I was still fulfilling every responsibility, just reallocating which account covered what. She wouldn't notice yet, but in a few weeks, she'd see that the lines between her lifestyle and my income had shifted. And by then, it wouldn't matter. A few days later, I brought up our wedding anniversary. It was coming up in 3 weeks. I said we should take a trip. Somewhere nice. Somewhere she'd wanted to go for years, but I had always hesitated, thinking practicality mattered. Now, I had no intention of going. I wanted to see her reaction. She lit up. Not because of the trip, but because she believed the leash was still in her hand. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she gasped, already thinking aloud about flights and outfits. "You've really grown, you know? Finally learning to treat me the way I deserve." I told her to block the week off. I'd take care of everything. She wouldn't have to lift a finger. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "You're finally getting it," she said. That night, I called the travel agency and reserved 2 one-way tickets to different cities. She wasn't coming with me, and she wouldn't know until I was already gone. While I kept smiling, I also kept watching. Her phone habits, her tone, the subtle looks she exchanged with certain people. I paid attention like never before, and every hour revealed something. A comment made under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. A story she twisted while recounting it to her friends. She was rewriting reality in real time, always painting herself as the charming, long-suffering wife of a sweet but clueless man. And they believed her. That was the part that used to hurt, until I realized they weren't allies. They were her audience. I wasn't invited into her inner circle. I was a character in her show. But every show ends. The following week, I started shifting my personal files to a cloud drive. Bank records, tax documents, health insurance details, things she'd never asked about, because she assumed they would always be handled. I also canceled the renewal of our storage unit, the one filled with her event props and decor. It would expire right after I left. Let her figure that out herself. On Saturday, I sat on the patio with a whiskey I didn't usually drink. She was upstairs in the bath, playing soft music, probably scrolling through flights or sending a friend another smug message about her perfect little life. And that's when I got the final spark I needed. My phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. She thought she was texting someone else. It read, "I swear he has no clue. Can't believe you got him to plan the trip after the way you trashed him last month. You're an actual magician." I stared at the screen. Let the words settle. Then I sent back a single reply. "I'm looking forward to the show. Don't forget to clap when the finale starts." No response came. The next week, I printed my flight confirmation, placed it in a plain envelope, and tucked it into the drawer beside the bed. Not hidden, just delayed. Because there was still one thing left to do, the moment that would define everything. I would give her one final opportunity to be different, to choose differently. Not because I thought she would, but because I wanted the satisfaction of knowing I had given her that last chance. And when she wasted it, as I knew she would, I'd vanish. Not to punish her, not to make her suffer, but to prove a simple truth. Kindness isn't weakness, but it's not infinite, either. She failed the test with enthusiasm. It was a Thursday evening, 2 weeks before the anniversary trip that was never going to happen. I had just come back from a fake meeting I invented for work, a harmless excuse to be out for a few hours while I closed the final details of my departure. The rental was paid through the next month, all my sensitive documents backed up, and my resignation from our joint lease scheduled for the following Monday. Everything was aligned, methodical. All that remained was the question, would she notice I was slipping away? So I offered her one final moment, not to save us, but to prove, once and for all, who she really was when no performance was required. I made dinner that night. Nothing extravagant, just her favorites, but plated the way she liked. Pan-seared scallops, her favorite wild mushroom risotto, and the rose she always claimed was too pretty to drink, but emptied with every third sip. I even lit candles, dimmed the lights, put on the playlist we once made together during better years. It was nostalgia on display, a curated memory she didn't realize had an expiration date. She walked in, heels clicking on the floor, clearly caught off guard. "Well, what's all this?" "Just felt like cooking," I said simply. "Thought we could talk." She raised an eyebrow but smiled anyway. Should I be nervous? Not at all. We sat. She talked about work, about a new client, about someone named Jared who just doesn't get it, and how she had to practically walk him through everything like a child. I nodded along, listening more to her tone than her words. She wasn't interested in a conversation. She was performing again, even here. Halfway through the second glass, I steered the dialogue. "I've been thinking about us," I said. She paused only briefly, chewing slowly. "Yeah, I want to make things better. Really better. For both of us. Not just for show." She gave me a soft, skeptical smile. "This isn't about therapy again, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about us. About being honest." She tilted her head, waiting. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. "If there's anything you need from me, anything you feel I've missed or overlooked, now's the time to tell me." She blinked, caught off guard. For a brief moment, I saw something behind her eyes that almost resembled vulnerability. But then she laughed. Not a mean laugh. Not mocking. Just amused. As if what I offered, openness, a bridge, a reset, was quaint. "Come on," she said. "You don't need to get all poetic. We're fine. Don't overthink." "I'm not," I said. "I just want you to feel like you can be real with me. About anything. Even the stuff that doesn't sound pretty." She leaned back, glass in hand. "You always take things so seriously. Can't we just enjoy dinner?" That was her answer. Not cruelty. Just detachment. And that, more than mockery, confirmed everything I needed to know. She didn't even see a problem. That was how far gone we were. My silence, my distance, my strange mood, none of it registered. The version of me she thought she had on lock, the eager, reliable husband, had already vanished. She just hadn't realized it yet. After dinner, she stood and kissed my cheek absent-mindedly. "Thanks for the meal, babe. That was sweet." Sweet. She walked upstairs, humming to herself, probably thinking she had won another round of invisible chess. I cleared the dishes, wiped the counter, and left the final envelope under her pillow. The next morning, I didn't say goodbye. Just slipped out the door before dawn, leaving her to wake to silence. By the time she opened the envelope, I was already airborne. Inside, she'd find the reservation for the trip she was so eager about, with both tickets. Except one was in her name, and the other was in mine, departing from a different city, headed to a different continent. A personal note attached in neat handwriting read, "Kindness should never have been mistaken for complacency. You laughed at the way I loved you, so I became the man who doesn't stay for the encore. No arguments. No confrontation. Just the facts. I changed my number that morning, canceled the return flight, informed our landlord that I wouldn't be renewing the lease. My portion of the rent would be paid through the end of the month, hers wouldn't. Not because I was spiteful, but because she had made it clear I was never needed, just convenient." The mutual friends started texting days later. A few pretended concern. Others were more blunt. "What happened? You really just left? Did something go wrong?" One message came from Tessa. It simply said, "She's not okay. She's really shaken. She didn't see it coming." That one I responded to. All I said was, "She never looked." Because that's the truth of it. I was always visible. And now, she can sit at the table she once laughed across, empty glass in hand, flickering candle burning out, and try to piece together how the story ended without her realizing it had even begun. But me? I had already started writing a new one. The last time I saw her was in a photo someone else posted, One of those group pictures from a party where everyone's trying too hard to look carefree. She was in the middle, glass in hand, smile wide, but her eyes gave it away. They weren't focused on the camera. They weren't focused at all. I knew that look. I'd seen it on her face before, in the rare moments she let her guard drop. It was the expression of someone still pretending they had control. I didn't miss her. Not in the way people assume. I didn't long for the sound of her voice, or the shape of her laugh, or the scent of her favorite perfume lingering in a shared space. What I missed, if anything, was the version of myself I had been before I realized I was performing for someone who never clapped. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. It arrived slowly, like air filling a room that had been sealed too long. I stopped apologizing for being quiet. I ate dinner alone without checking the time. I stood in grocery aisles and bought the things I liked, not the brands she preferred. These weren't acts of rebellion, just the slow reclaiming of a life that had been handed over in fragments, piece by piece, in the name of love that never truly saw me. Her messages came later, not immediately. She waited, probably thinking silence would lure me back, that I'd get cold or regretful. But when it became clear I wasn't playing the same role anymore, she shifted. It started with confusion. "Where are you?" Then evolved into concern. "Can we talk? Please." Eventually, the messages carried a tone she rarely used: panic. I messed up. I didn't realize. I didn't mean what I said. I was just venting. I never thought you'd actually leave. That part made me pause. Actually leave. As if my exit wasn't supposed to be real. As if all my sacrifices were expected to remain invisible, permanently taken for granted. She didn't grieve the loss of me, only the collapse of the narrative she'd built around me. The dependable figure who didn't demand recognition, who didn't question the imbalances. I didn't respond. There was no need to explain anything to someone who had been handed years of clarity and ignored every signal. But what I did do, quietly, for myself was watch. Not obsessively. Just enough to see what life looked like without me in it. It unraveled. Friends she had leaned on started pulling away. The jokes weren't funny anymore without a target. Her stories began to fall flat when they were no longer rooted in control. The pedestal she had built using my devotion as a foundation began to crack when no one else stepped in to keep her elevated. She tried to rebuild, I could tell. New posts, new faces, new cities, even. But people noticed. Those who had once believed the image she projected now saw the seams. When you lose someone quiet, it doesn't register right away, but over time, the silence grows louder than any words ever could. Meanwhile, I changed, not dramatically, not outwardly, but deeply. I no longer reached for my phone the second it buzzed. I no longer explained my decisions. I found comfort in solitude and clarity in simplicity. Life became lighter without the weight of unspoken expectations and constant accommodation. I met someone months later. Not in the way movies romanticize, no chance encounter at a bookstore or spilled coffee leading to laughter. She was a colleague, someone I'd known in passing. We spoke about work at first, then slowly wandered into real conversation. She listened. Not out of obligation or performance. She listened because she was present. One night, as we walked near the waterfront, I told her something small, a childhood memory about building a kite with my dad. It wasn't significant, but it was mine. She smiled, not politely, but genuinely. "That's beautiful," she said. "You've got a quiet way of noticing things most people miss." That stuck with me. A quiet way of noticing things. For so long, I thought kindness had to be loud to be valid, that I had to prove I was good, prove I was loyal, prove I was enough. But in truth, real kindness doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to be given to someone who sees it for what it is. And now, she can sit among strangers who only know the version of herself she polishes for display, while I live days that don't revolve around repair or damage control. There was never a moment where I wished I'd handled things differently. Not once did I replay a scene and wonder if I should have fought harder. Because the truth is, you can't fight for someone who never stood beside you in the first place. She laughed at me once, laughed at the way I showed up, at the softness I carried like a flaw. She made me a punchline in a story that no longer needed to be told. But I became something else. Not louder. Just gone. And in that absence, she finally learned what it means when the version of a man who stays disappears without warning, without apology, without looking back.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.